then here I am. All right. So learning the buttons to push, just doing a little bit of practice action, but wanted to do something constructive. So the question is, what are you doing here? Well, hi, I'm DrKindle. I'm here to help, really to serve, to be an instrument in whatever ways that you want to beat on me. I mean, like, I've been through it. I grew up in the oil field, so like getting beat on, and in the country, like we would just fight. Like fighting was fun. So we have a room, kind of like the size of this room, and I can't say the name that we'd call the name of the game, but it was smear the person with the ball, right? And it rhymed, and so that's no longer politically correct. But back then, like you're just weird if you had the ball. So, but anyhow. So there'd be about 8 of us in a room like this, divvy up teams based on size, and we'd throw the ball to one another. And whoever we wanted to smear that day, then we would or the small person, and I was the smallest one usually of the group. Not necessarily the smallest, but I was definitely in the small category. Because like corn-fed boys, they was kind of big, like they'd been working already. We were only 10, 12 years old or whatever, sometimes younger. But that was just what we did. So so you'd get the ball, and you just got to run straight through the room, and nobody hits you. So hitting and violence and all that was kind of a normal thing growing up that way, and so that was just how things were. Then I moved to Austin, and things weren't that way. And this was back, in the 80s and the 90s. And so there was a lot of differences to adjust to there. And now I am no longer in the oil field. I worked out there for quite a while, from moving pipes, turning wrenches, operating equipment, doing the dirty work, running a shovel, just whatever it took some days. If the market was up, we usually sat in the office a little bit more because we didn't really need to move any dirt that day. And when the liquids were making the money, then the dirt didn't matter as much. So, but that's, whenever the markets would be down, it'd cost, $18 to get the oil out of the ground, and market was only giving you 16. Well, what else is out here? Some dirt. Sell some dirt. So we'd move some dirt. But then I noticed that these windmill things were starting to pop up. So I talked to my stepdad about researching that. Went and talked to Enron, and they gave me the information on the windmills. But after running some numbers, it didn't really work out that well. And so and that's whenever I got into drag racing. Because there was nothing else to do except for to drive the cars around, because that's what oil did, was make gasoline and tires and make it reasonable to travel around the country, to go see things, to enjoy some sort of culture. And so I was driving back and forth between Austin and the Amarillo area, as a teenager, just driving back and forth, learning country roads, learning how people act, stopping, talking to people along the way, just seeing like what's different. The cities are dramatically different than even just an hour outside of them or 30 minutes outside of them sometimes. The culture really is that diverse in Texas. They say everything's bigger in Texas. I've tried to leave this great state. I lived in New York City. I went and I lived up in the mountains by Boulder, and just none of it compares. That's why everybody's moving to Texas, and they call Austin the crypto capital of the world. I know I'm doxing myself, but I don't care. I'm in Austin. Come see me, baby boy. Like, it's not about. I don't understand this privacy thing as much as, or value it as much as other people do. Sure. Well, one of my philosophies is just don't make enemies, and then like no one will want to hurt you. If they do want to hurt you, then like they're just bad people, and it's gonna happen. And there's no blocks that I'm willing to take in my life to protect myself that are unreasonable when it comes to compromising my freedoms, those certain inalienable rights. God created us, or however you believe that we were created, in this perfect image. What is perfection? Perfection is an ideal. If you achieve perfection, would that still be perfect? So that goes back to the healing. Doing this whole doctor thing. What's really going on in your life? When you sit and you evaluate why you're doing what you're doing, like, why do you get up and go to work? Why do I invest in crypto? Why do I have this passion to sit here in front of this camera, talk to it, and hope that you listen and do something with your life, maybe similar, maybe not, just whatever is in accordance with your free will and for the greater good of all. Those are my prayers when someone invites me in to work with them, trusts me, and gives me the ability to hold that safe space with them. If whatever occurs in that space is not in accordance with each of our individual I am presences, our free will, what I'm fighting for, and it does not contribute to the greater good of all. Just because you and I think it might be a good thing, if that doesn't help the whole, then I choose not to contribute my capacity to that purpose. So with those things as my guiding principles, I have come to love the crypto community. And I don't like that necessarily word, but we got to use words to describe what it is we're trying to talk about. If you've been here long enough, then you know it. You're not worried about my definitions. If you are just entering the space, I need to talk to you in a way that you understand about how the real world works and how this world works, so that you can build the bridges yourself and participate in the islands of this ocean that best suit you and your individual needs. Some people have financial risk tolerances that are much different than others. And whenever I first began to have the wantingness to share this crypto information, because the people closest to me did not have the foggiest idea of the sentences I was even saying. Like 8 of the words in that sentence you used have no meaning to me whatsoever. And so I went to decide, how could I give information that I could point someone that I was talking to towards without talking over their head, make them feel like they were being talked down to, and really speak from a point that they were previously familiar with. And I decided, in the markets, blue chips is always the safest thing. So it's like, if you're going to invest something and you don't know what you're doing, invest in some blue chips. So that's how I first started looking at the crypto space through, is like, okay, I'm going to sit myself 10 years down the road. That's the number I picked because that's how long I had held my stock assets for, to a point where I felt like it was a safe exit point, and I started moving that money into crypto. At first, I didn't know what I was doing, so I just did a part of it. And then once achieving a certain level of comfortability, then even selling assets that were non-performing or really acted as liabilities with my inability to secure employment. Some of those reasons health, others mental, and other areas of it are willingness to work. Me personally, I have this gift. And so if I sell my time to a clock, I am robbing the world of the ability to use this gift. Whether or not the world wants it is beyond my control. However, if I do not offer, it cannot be received. And as I have in the past put myself out there publicly in order to be available, I've had to do that with caution, because what am I giving up by allowing my energy to be cycled with and mixed up? So I had to really determine in my life what was important. What do I hold on to? Like, what are my problems? Like, what am I willing to deal with? What am I not willing to deal with? Many people are not willing to deal with their problems. To go deep down this rabbit hole that I have went down, I had to say, some shit comes up, like, here I am. And so that vulnerability, sharing with others, is what I feel is necessary in order to even have the chance for them to be willing to look at their lives and see how they could better themselves for whatever that they feel important. Me, I kind of, like, I was happily married for many years. I've received so many great blessings and so many gifts, and had so many elders look out for me in the ways of knowledge and care, that I feel it irresponsible to not. I feel like I would not be what I said I am if I do not share this thing. The first time a stranger allowed me to put my hands on his body, and the next day him call and tell me that I transformed his life, that he was able to sleep, that he had not been able to sleep in many years because of just the hour that we had spent together, gave me a wake-up call that said that there's real purpose in this world for us to pursue whenever we have this opportunity of this physical manifestation of a body, that we've vibrated at this frequency, we've chosen this path, and now that we're here and we see the mess, like, what do we do with it? So scientifically, at first, when I learned Reiki, I was very off-put. Reiki in Japanese is universal life force energy. So there's no levels of esotericism that really need to cloak what it is. It's just, it's from a biblical narrative. It's like the power of we were created in His image. If we're all the same, if our DNA is all the same, it's all frequency. We're all manifestations of God, and we're all manifestations of the same. And so to rewind that into a usable way, if you have not heard of Dr. Emoto, he's a Japanese doctor who did experiments with water and how our thoughts even can affect the water in a profound way. If the human body is majority water, then that's why just smiling at someone can totally change their day. And that is what the basis of the Reiki practice has taught me, is, like, how you present yourself in the world. So I lived in my RV for quite a while. Like, if you look at the Buddhist path, if a man is raised as a prince and then goes to a life of suffering, then I think he has the ability to appreciate more what he had, but also becomes frustrated with the difference between the two, when kind of the other could complement or balance the other one, but each is unwilling to speak with one another. So the yogic practice, which I've practiced for about 15 years or so now, almost 20 now. But the concept of non-attachment, getting rid of stuff, empty house theory, getting rid of attachments. I ended up asking for a divorce, not because she was not a great wife, not because I didn't value those things, and I still do value those things. Like, it may seem stereotypical, but in a codependent relationship, like cooking and cleaning, just the very basic building blocks of life that allows the flourishment of ideas. If I can sit in front of this computer and do research, if I can hit these books or go to this classroom because there's a great speaker over here, because I'm not hungry, and I slept great because my sheets were clean, my pillows were fluffed, like my wife laid down with me and said goodnight, or kissed me goodnight, went off to work, or whatever things that provide comfort. And that's what, whenever I retired at age 27, we negotiated a contract for a wind farm. I'm a developer, early stage developer. So whenever we signed that paper, it said for 60 years to me, to my mind, that I didn't have to worry about where to eat. I didn't have to worry about where to sleep. Whether or not these things are true or manifested is irrelevant to the conversation. The freedom of mind that gave me for the last 15 years, I felt lonely. My yoga practice took me away from, I don't say it took me away, led me to choose to move away from the family structure, which did not support the altruistic momentum that I wish to carry through life. As I read from my mentors, that until they were 60, and this is personal and through books, it was basically like till they were 60, they didn't make any money. These are people that are millionaires in their 20s, 30s, whatever. They're saying I didn't make any real money until I was 60. And then I couldn't enjoy it because I'd been so focused on making that money and had not paid attention to my health or diet. And so the wisdom of these men allowed me at age 23 or 24 to no longer be focused on money. And within a few years, I was retired. And so my health became very important to me. Choosing how to preserve the ability to communicate, how can I bring a kid into this world? I'm not grown up. That was before I even coming to why would I bring a human into this world? Like, I'm not grown up. How am I going to raise a kid? I'm 25, 30 years old, and I'm still doing kid things. I'm still making decisions that, don't make my parents proud. Why would I want to teach these things to someone else? Doesn't make sense. So I did not have my first child until 35. I'm not able to participate in her life on a daily basis through the mother's choosing. Me living in my RV, having no ammunition, I now am far behind in that battle. So what do I do between now and then? Whenever I found Hex, what little savings I did have that I had promised to my little girl, I was able to put that into a contract and preserve it to save it from me getting hungry or wanting this or needing this or thinking I need something, when the only promise I've made to God is that when that little girl needs a car or a college or whatever at that period of time, that I'll be there. So in order for me to meet my obligations as a dad, not in the way that I want them to, but in the way that the cards have been dealt to me in order for me to do, Hex gave me that light back. I was depressed. I didn't actually want to kill myself, but living through that process of thinking about, like, would that be better? Having sat with many people who were much closer to that reality, or have tried, or I may have watched try, then I wasn't there. I'm not a suicidal person. I'm too narcissistic. This ego thing, super ego, I don't know. I felt like I had destroyed my ego at a certain point, and I got boring. I won't say I didn't like myself. It's just like, what are you doing? Like, all right, cool. Like, here I am, a meat bag. Now what? So it's like, how am I going to act? Wait, act. Hold up. Life is a movie. So then, like, in the movie, how you act is your character. And it's like characters that so what's the difference really? So, like, now, if my ego is, let's say, destroyed or in check, or has some sort of definition even. So now that I've said, like, okay, from an ego perspective, I'm kind of boring. Call me names, like 8 Mile Theory, like, yep, trailer trash, like, I've done it all. Like, if I hadn't done it, I probably went out and did it. That way, if you came at me with it, and be like, yeah, been there, done that. Let's talk about whatever subject's at hand right now. Not this other nonsense. We can talk about that if that is going to advance our conversation so we can build trust. But, like, whatever name you want to call me, yep, been there, done that. Now what? Like, so having trust in a person is, to me, easier. Like, moving back to Hex, like, so Richard Hart got some, because he was making some email schemes, and he was trying to market his product. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. Somebody else got upset at him and said, we don't like the way you're doing this. And so they fined him, etc. If there's more to the story, then, that's simply my ignorance. But as far as just that as being as an easy way to dismiss someone, a person learns more from their mistakes than they do their successes. So someone that has a long line of success is just flying on euphoria, and doesn't know what it's like to be in the dirt. But if you've gotten kicked down, and if something you did is advancing, there's going to be something that feels like it's being advanced against and will attempt to fight you. I've been literally locked in a hole for over a month because of this thing, and I fear that every day. And that is part of my motivation to publish these videos, even if no one really cares. If my daughter looks back and is like, why is dad in jail? It's because he was fighting. He was fighting for this freedoms that are guaranteed in our Constitution. And as an American citizen, I am proud to be an American citizen of the ideals of 7 generations ago. I am embarrassed by the actions or inaction of many of my brothers, many of my citizens that under the same flag, and that there is these layers of complexity to this system that were unintended and are destructive. So where I had to this is going to turn to a bit of a history lesson, because what are we doing here? What are we doing here? I don't really want to talk about myself a lot on this YouTube channel. The point of this channel, to me, is to blur the line between wealth and health. Me and a fellow came up with the word wealthtrition. Like like your health, your nutrition, your wealth. I think they're really commingled in a way, and that I'm going to stop talking in that way. All right. So let's go back to that 15-year thing. For 15 years, I've been retired, focusing on my health, getting ridiculed for forward advancing thoughts, but looking at that um, as a privilege that I've now went through, that I'm seeing and am being introduced to an entire community that has that feeling. The time works just perfect. Like 15 years is how long I've been retired. And the moment you stake hex, there's this indescribable, or maybe it can be described, but there's a weight that's lifted. Me, it was my obligation for my daughter, which was the only thing that I had brought into this life that I had not resolved. Everything else was just self goals, and whether or not I achieve those or meet those, that's my process, and it's relatively unimportant for, in 100 years, who's going to care? Who's going to remember your name? What is it going to matter? What did you do? Look at it through that lens, and it becomes a much less complex debate about how you spend your days. So, all right, I was introduced to Bitcoin, and it was $200, Ethereum $1.10, and I understood them, but I did not appreciate nor adopt them in the way that I'm now sitting in front of you, considering. So, having the hindsight of, we'll call it, missing those opportunities, seeing like, oh my gosh, a couple $100 can go into a significant number in a relatively short period of time. What does that say? Because these units of measurement are still the same, however, they are compared to the US dollar. And so that really said to me, the US dollar compared to these is weak. So as those ratios continue to change, it felt foolish for me to ignore those things any further whenever I'm thinking about 10 years down the road. It's like, what's a blue chip? For those of you who don't know, a blue chip is just like Walmart, Coca-Cola, Sears, General Electric, these things that were considered very, very, very safe from an investment perspective. And so if someone, now that I've been out onboarding a lot more, and receiving, like some just legitimate questions and legitimate feedback from people who are not my friends, just a complete stranger, like, hi, have you heard about? First off, I think the way that I've seen people being approached, there's a lot of learning to be had, and my goal here is to kind of show examples, more so, or mostly so, but also kind of make a formula for how to onboard. I think the question that I will ask until I find a better one or someone suggests a better one, whenever I approach a stranger, I ask them, do you trade crypto? If they're a trader, they're going to immediately go into a high level conversation. Crypto, is that the same thing as Bitcoin? If that's the response, then I shouldn't tell them about Pulse Chain, and that's just gonna, what are you talking about, dude? Then keep the conversation much simple. But that question, do you trade crypto? They're gonna tell you, oh, I have a Coinbase account, or yeah, I'm a XYZ maximalist, or like, oh my gosh, I've heard about Sheeb, or whatever their knowledge is, they're going to tell you that right away, because they understand that you have some value to offer them, but it's a non-threatening question. If they don't trade crypto, It's just no. If they're not interested, then they kind of just ignore you and you go away. But I say, well, so the person that I have really had the best interactions with is, well, I've heard about, all this stuff and I want to get into it, but I don't know how, and I work or X, Y, have kids, etc. So I don't have, 10 hours a day for 6 months to really get to understand this. Can you help me? And, some of the common, I guess, talking points, because if you're into the crypto space, after a certain period of time, like you're familiar with the concepts and the words even. So like Hex is a money printer. If you tell that to someone that has no clue, other than Bitcoin is magic internet money, there's like, okay, I'm not going to open my wallet and share with you. And so in order to effectively onboard people, I think we need to learn how to meet them at their place. I used to sell cars, and they had this acronym, SPACE. Whenever they came in, we had to, in order to not just talk to them, I needed to ask them, what is most important to you? And you can just ask this specific question if the conversation is at that place. Is it safety, performance, accessories, comfort and convenience, or economics? Okay, I'm really worried about gas mileage. And they don't really care about the Bluetooth as much, other than just like it has Bluetooth. Okay, they want to hear about something else. If they have, if comfort and convenience is their thing, but what the one that was the easiest. If I'm a little bit here. So the one that was the easiest was safety. All right, so we're at a Honda dealership, right? All right, Mercedes bought this technology from Honda, and I want to show you a little bit about it. Here's my business card, right? Okay, so I'm going to be a door. Okay, your daughter is sitting right behind that door. I want you to be a car. I want you to hit that, run right into her, right? All right. Well, Honda goes above and beyond the expectations, and Mercedes-Benz actually bought this technology from them. These corrugated steel in the beams, it's much heavier than what is required. You can look it up if you'd like. But now, I'm still that same material. Now your loved one is still right here behind this door. Be that car. It's not going anywhere. Okay? So that's the importance of a needs analysis. If I showed that to somebody that's worried about just gas mileage to and from work, and they ride a motorcycle otherwise, they're kind of really they're not so much concerned with that, but if they're there with their kids or they're grasping someone that's important to them, I didn't have to talk anymore. We just went and we wrote the contract. Okay. But if I tell someone Hex is a money printer and they're worth $400 million, they're just not going to listen to you anymore. In order for the continuation of a serious product adoption, we have to learn how to talk to people. And so my goal here is to start with the people that I know closest to me, produce videos that I can say, hey, go watch this video that's titled XYZ. In the beginning, my channel will be somewhat of a mess, but I'm starting to reach out to people who I think provide value to the space in the area of education and onboarding. Okay, so once someone becomes passionate, then there's plenty of content creators within the Hex community that are willing to talk more about Hex in ways that that aren't as important to me, and so I want to go out and I'm going to show people Hex, and through the I think the catalog of those interactions and with the discussions with other people within the space, from what I've already seen, I think we can maximize our efforts, because there's no lack in willingness and wantingness to share this information. People in their personal circles I'm sure are doing a great job, or otherwise Hex wouldn't be growing. But I think we can do better. Once we have ventured into the realm of spending money in a very public way, whatever tools and words are used in those efforts are very important. And I hate to see good people with good intentions deploy resources that they could deploy by their own intent. They could deploy it in a more effective way. Now that we have this, like with the Crypto Sparbuck tour, they created the mold. Like, it is out there. There's not, but as the events grew, it was more and more hexagons, and more and more no coiners as well. However, the primary focus of this is not to educate hexagons. It's to to ask people to join the hex community. So advertising to hexagons doesn't necessarily give us the ability to reach those people directly. Now, if we have a group of hexagons, we need to talk about how to be better hexagons, how to rep our city, like whatever. Like that's what we're doing. As we move into this cryptographic world of decentralization being a guiding factor, as DAOs become more prevalent, they will have the ability, responsibility, and the position to influence and really break down these borders that we've created. Borders based on ideals are how our minds are organized anyways. These artificial lines on maps sometimes are great, sometimes are not. And so back into the history of money, when I was like, all right, this US dollar thing has been around as long as I've been alive, and I trust it, and so does other people. But being involved in the oil industry, looking at OPEC, it's basically the countries that the United States do not like, for just shortness of narrative, and have a lot of oil. They control how much oil they put onto the market per an agreement. It's a cartel. And so the oil, and now we have Russia, which is a major player, and China has always been. So that's how I first started to study economics. It was I was in jail, and I read a Chinese. I had my significant other send me a Chinese economy textbook, and read through that in order to understand how like the Chinese culture and how money worked and in their space, because I was interested in possibly participating in their economy. And so why is the US dollar the dominant dollar? Well, my answer is the nuclear bomb. Okay, we created it, we deployed it. We said, like, nobody wants this, right? Like, you don't want us to blow you up, so like let's try to make a fair playing field. So the US dollar was given the capacity to really denominate how value was communicated between warring nations. I'm going to scatter around a bit, but in order to fully grasp the concept of like, why can Bitcoin at all become, like, why can't it become money? what is money? Let's look at the history of money. What is the US dollar? Like, that is the worldwide, that's the reserve currency of the world. What makes it the reserve currency? It's this history. But through the 50s and 60s, we started giving these dollar bills to other places, and they were stacking them up. And then France and Switzerland was finally like, hey, this paper's cool, but we want the gold. So they came over, they got a lot of gold. So by the late 60s, even though we had received quite a bit of European gold, the movements had been war-based primarily, we said, hey, maybe we don't want to give out any more gold. It wasn't really a we, from my understanding. It was more so just Richard Nixon and whomever he listened to, or if he just decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. Regardless of the whys, in 1971, he said, we're going to temporarily suspend the convertibility to gold. Well, that's been over 50 years now. So for 50 years, these US dollars have, been just money, not any sort of specie. And so that trust was broken in 1971. That it survived for this long is really just, well, why has it survived this long? Let's, so as to not speculate, why has it survived? Of course, there's been further warring. I think oil and money and war are intimately connected, but without viewing it from a political lens, there has been no better alternative. There has been no instrument better than the US dollar to conduct this place. So until that qualifier is met, the US dollar is the most logical thing to exchange value, or the most logical instrument with which to denominate the methods of which we exchange. But before the US dollar, there's been many other systems. I studied mostly the history of the money in the United States. I haven't got to the rest of the world yet, but they for the last couple hundred years, those things have commingled quite nicely. And really, the coming and goings of monies is quite surprising in its turnover. Like, the first Bank of the United States was around for 20 years, and then there's nothing. So then the War of 1812 comes around, and we're like, oh man, we, being the United States, says we need some form of currency. We need banking. Yep, we do need this. Otherwise, moving beyond an agrarian society, which is a debatable crossroad of history. So certain founders of the United States wanted it to be an agrarian, more like kind of very, very farmer based, where everyone provided for themselves, and this was a place for their definition of independence. And then the other camp, the Federalists, said, well, let's create a greater society. And that's what has created the most. Okay, so we talked about the complexity of the layers of government. When these two parties switch every single time, which has happened multiple times now through the history of the United States, which reflects onto the world through the US dollar the last 80 years. Each time this party system has changed, the new party, for simplicity of explanation in my mind, has just created layers of laws that overshadow whatever they have done without repealing those laws that this other viewpoint has made. And so the abomination of the American principles, which, as I've said in the beginning, I do agree with wholeheartedly, though the American principles I still stand by. The American way as it is today, I can't make the same I don't like it. So the base question is why is crypto available in order to move us towards something else? It's because it has the potential for a better systematic application than the US dollar currently gives. So who the winner of this will be, and is there a winner, is yet to be determined. I'm not sure that the we'll call it product, that the product that to act as a currency exists yet. I'm not sure that we have the technology developed in order to do that, nor do I really think that the testing of this technology will be ready within the next 5 to 10 years. A couple more cycles, and the capitalization of the crypto research ability should be that to which it just becomes economically almost, if we don't come up with the right thing, eventually when the system breaks, if there's no replacement, then it's there's quite a bit of chaos. Whether or not you hold organization of society as a high priority, most of us do. We like watching YouTube. If you don't, if you like watching YouTube, you want there to be a fair method of exchange, a fair store of value. You want there to be a proper economy. And so aside from those arguments, there's a necessity for our sick system to be healed. If our body is happy because our water is treated with respect, the crops will grow better, the animals will be happier, the people will have less conflict. I think it starts with the water. So this doctor thing is more than is my character. Okay. I think it's kind of, like in past cultures, I'm not sure what the American place of it was called. And so I called myself doctor. And so like, there's a guy in Vegas. So I'm with the shaman here. I'm with the real life shaman. He's doing, cause after seeing stories, and I don't necessarily, I don't hold any title, after Reiki master. First master was like a thing. Like, I'm not even, I was attuned as a Reiki master, but I was not feeling comfortable even saying like I'm a Reiki master. But then after exercise of the knowledge and attainment of certain experiential moments, I became more comfortable with this. Is there a bug in my hair? And so continuation of studies and moving into like multidimensional transformation and finding these higher availabilities, working with guides and, spending much more time in prayer, defining words, whereas wisdom can be more easily given to someone who's open, but bound by some artificial boundaries that make their, I say I'm a wizard. One of my, a very devout Christians was like doing this to me. Like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, oh, I go to church to be with other wizards. Well, don't call me a wizard, but you are. Okay, so let's say we have these ideas or this knowledge. And then we have like a book or some words, some sound. And we take these two things, we combine them, and we send them to an imaginary thing, God, whatever. We say these things to an imaginary force or to an invisible force with expectations of some sort of result or action to be had in this physical plane that we can somehow numerate. A wizard is simply one who knows spells, so that you could call this a spell. A spell and a prayer are indistinguishable. I've just described both of them. So once I was able to be comfortable with Jesus laying on hands, I'm a wizard, and being able to explain those things to people to a point where now the biomechanical methods of survival which have been cultivated, now we're not in defense mode. All right, I may not like you, but whatever you're saying has truth to it. So even if I don't adopt your viewpoint or your way of seeing things or your course of action, we can have this temporary meeting of the minds. My free will can be affected by what you say. So if you have something to say, I need to hear it. That way, when I have this conversation again, I am careful to not activate any of these defense mechanisms. So all this experience, all this fucking crap I've been through can have weight for you, and you can use it without going through it. That's the beauty of helping someone, is I get to experience their pain. It goes through me. I can feel their body as if it was my body. I can feel their emotions as if they were my emotions. However, I'm not attached to whatever occurrence in that individual's life that has created those. And so the fellow that told me I transformed his life because he could sleep because his ears stopped ringing, he just realized that a few people in his life had died and he hadn't processed it because life, and they all happened back to back to back. So he did that. He was fine. I cried with him. I was tired with him during our session, but afterwards, I grounded it, did a little bit of yoga, whatever I needed to do with my tools to release that was much easier for me than it was for him. And then once the emotional parts of things were relieved, then he could deal with the physical very simply and move on with his life. So that's the whole doctor thing, is that's my character. All right. So I'm here to help with dis-ease. So as I would filter through many people's mental problems, they seem to come down to finances. I say I got 99 problems and money can solve 71 of them. And so that's the place that money has within our mental health picture. And so being able to provide tools that address that, and in my opinion, Hex is the least likely to fail. I can't say that any company on the stock market has more stability. Nor could you. And so I am learning to read code and want to continue to educate the best I can. But the most important thing that I weight in my decision to support Hex, I don't wear logos. I was paid to wear logos through, drag racing, General Motors, Castrol, Dunlop, lots of automotive companies. We were paid to wear their logo. So in my day-to-day life, I don't wear logos, so that I have a Hex hat, and like I have these cards, with my economic energy on a daily basis in order to be able to share. I do not take lightly. I do not sell things that I think are dangerous or have a high risk potential unless you're aware of that. So everyone knows that crypto is speculative, because we're vying to replace the US dollar. That's the ultimate lens, I think, that needs to be looked through in order to evaluate how long any particular project may or may not be viable. So through that 10 years blue chip perspective, through what can I do to help the world, in 100 years, it's very unlikely that anyone will remember my name, your name, or most other people's names that exist today. It's within the realm of possibility that our society even is, completely unrecognizable. However, those around you, those after you, if you've created life, if you have any sort of altruistic hopes, enjoy the struggle, but try to leave some sort of roadmap, some sort of marks, some sort of contribution of energy. Leave it better than you found it. If these things don't resonate with you, then you probably haven't got this far. But those do. Stick with me for a while. Help me out. In my practice, in my life, my voice has been just beat down. And so, my personal goals in life: provide for my daughter, building a relationship with her, every month that we get to see each other. But as the years go on, I didn't appreciate my parents until much later in life, until after I figured out they were wrong about so many things. And so my re-education of self, I think, is a guiding principle of how I want to be a father. I spoil my little girl, but I don't want her to think that, I don't bring her gifts sometimes. That way we just have to play or create. We have to imagine whatever it is that we need to do. And it's, it seems to be working beautifully. So my goal is to provide for her. I have a fortune cookie that says success is the best form of revenge. So for those people that have economically hurt me, I hope you live forever. I want you to see me succeed, and I will sacrifice many of the comforts of life in order to have this massive success, and hopefully it's not even in my pocket. If I can make as many people able to provide for themselves financially as I would be able to should someone had not taken that from me whenever it was completely available, then that's how I will feel happy taking my last breath. My daughter's fine, and I've gotten my egoic sense of revenge by helping other people become financially free and being able to think the way that I have for the last 15 years, the way that they already are for the next 15 years and for the next 100 years after that. So if you're on board with that, stick around, encourage me, give me fuel, and let's do this. All right. Which buttons do we push? Learn to push buttons. It's the name of the game. Just learn to push buttons.